hitting the go live button. It's going to take another 10 seconds or so. Oh, by the way, should I call you just alphacenturian for the sake of today's conversation?
Just call me Alpha. Just
Alpha.
Alpha. Alpha's fine.
Perfect. We'll be live in a second. All right.
I've never used... No, go ahead.
We're live. What's up, Alpha?
Hello, Kevin. I'm glad we're finally able to talk to each other.
Me too. This conversation's been a long time coming. We've talked about talking for probably close to like a year or something like that. But I think our schedules have just been tough to align. So here we are at 6 a.m. your time, making it happen.
Yes.
So
I think it's funny that before when we were talking, like you had yet to like hit, and now like you're already like on Michael's channel and Trent's talked about you and everything else. Like you've already like blown up, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm never gonna talk to him again. So thank you.
No, I'm not that big. I like to think that I'm infamous in the sense that people know about me, but I'm not actually like popular. You know what I mean? Big difference between those two, I think.
So the reason there's like what I want to talk to you about is that you seem to have a very unique Catholicism that I'm worried, and maybe you share this worry or not, that people like Michael and other bigger names that are growing are taking you as more an example of what Catholics think rather than just a type of Catholic who had a bad experience and left the faith. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I do a fairly good job of. Well, actually, no. I think that the kind of Catholicism that I talk about is more liberal than the kinds of Catholics that exist in the circles that I'm from. So like when I talk to people, so like the stream that I did, are you talking about the stream that I did with Michael Beverly responding to?
I reviewed that one last night just because I was very curious about what you were going to say in it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I've been watching your content, actually. I've been watching your channel. I enjoy your channel. But I do note that you do seem to have a particular flavor of Catholicism, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, rad trad.
Yeah. And now, if you don't mind me asking, because I had some pushback on some of the claims that you've been making. I like your channel, by the way. I think that if you're going to be discontent with Catholicism, you should at least know about Catholicism. So I appreciate that about you a lot. You're not like Glassland Jen, who knew nothing about Catholicism and was saying how terrible it was. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was my whole life for most of my life.
So how authoritative for you are the church fathers and, let's say, the Lateran doctrines? How authoritative for you are they compared to the spirit of Vatican II?
So in the community that I'm from, Vatican II was not at all authoritative. Vatican II, the way that we would often talk about it is that Vatican II explicitly claimed that it was a pastoral council. They issued no anathemas, unlike Vatican I, and so it was pretty clear to us that Vatican II was safe to ignore. Especially
But
because,
do you see how that's kind of an odd thing for, like, let's say someone's trying to learn from you what a lay Catholic in the Novus Ordo, in the most common version of the Mass that's worldwide, thinks you're kind of a bad representation on only that end, not as in a bad representation of what a Catholic thinks, but just like,
I wouldn't even call myself a bad representation. I would call myself not at all a representation of what Novus Ordo Catholics think. We thought that Novus Ordo Catholics were all going to hell. We didn't want to be associated with Novus Ordo Catholics. We were traditionalists. So I think that I represent the traditionalist movement mostly accurately. Like, I mean, obviously when I inject my own personal opinion, like I might say they're crazy or something. Like they don't think that they are crazy. But that's the world I come from, you know? And so I think I make it pretty clear that my upbringing was not Novus Ordo. It was not mainstream in any way, shape, or form. And that we all thought that the Novus Ordo people were doing clown masses. And we thought that, we were like, maybe a Novus Ordo mass is actually illicit. Maybe. but maybe it doesn't fulfill your Sunday obligation. We had people at my chapel who would actually go to an Orthodox mass before
Mm.
they went to a Novus Ordo mass.
No, I
So
got you. I got you.
yeah.
So on that note, how strong or weak, or because I know you obviously you've read a lot since then, is your understanding of Vatican II Catholics? Like, what do you understand about them now as opposed to when you left your more eclectic version of Catholicism?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer the question in the way that you were trying to
Hmm.
ask it, but I have a lot more respect for like normie Catholics now
Hmm.
than I used to. I used to think that all of them were kind of intellectually like um, either dishonest or ignorant. If anybody wasn't, like, if you were being honest and if you were knowledgeable, you would be a trad. That was kind of my MO. Um,
So I noticed you were talking last night about the cognitive dissonance that you think Catholics have when looking at older documents. So I've read everything except for the Lateran uh, councils. I've read everything. I just those set. I can't find a copy. I want to read a copy. I don't want to read a digital thing.
uh, did I not include a link in the slide deck that I presented? I thought I might have. Maybe I didn't.
Hmm. I didn't see it either way. So uh, if you had, I didn't see the link. I was basically just I usually listen to the to everything like as a podcast, even if it's a video.
Oh, okay. Here, let me put a link in the chat.
Okay.
It is to papalencyclicals.net.
Okay.
And they have the full transcript of the Fourth Lateran Council.
Do they by any chance have any links to like physical books? I love physical books, especially with the document stuff.
I'm not sure. I'm sure that there is a book that contains the text of the Fourth Lateran Council, uh, but it's not long enough
Mm.
to like make a book on its own. So I'm sure it's in like a collection, like a volume or something
Yeah,
like that.
I've been trying to get a collection of like all the Laterns. Now we're just born people. Let's move on. So let me ask two more questions, and then I'd love for you to give me some pushback and to ask about where I'm coming from because I'm part of the anti-apologetics crowd, but I'm also still part of the I'm a Catholic and I'm practicing crowd. So I'd love for you to push back on that as well. Um, Now that you're interacting with bigger names would be more representative Catholics, Protestants. You have Gavin, you have Trent, you have Kip, you have Michael, whatever he might represent. Um, where do you think you fall in place with uh, the kind of anti-Catholic, anti-Christian, anti-religious movement? Do you think you're becoming more atheistic, more agnostic? Where do you think you're at?
It's a really good question. I don't think that I'm becoming more atheistic. And the
Mhm.
reason I said that is because there was a couple of years prior to me starting my YouTube channel where I considered myself an atheist. But then, like,
Mhm.
I guess I like reflected on how confident I actually am in some of these arguments, and I realized I'm probably not confident enough, so I started calling myself an agnostic. And like, I did a stream the other night, with Matthew from
Mhm.
uh, uh, oh my gosh, Deliberation Under Ideal Conditions. Um, and he is a non-Christian theist, and he's like a theist for like pure philosophical reasons. And he was kind of throwing a whole bunch. He was like, "I know you're agnostic. I'm going to try to tip you over into theism." And I think he like presented a bunch of really convincing arguments. I mean, I shouldn't say like really convincing, as in anybody who's like rational has to accept them. But like,
Mhm.
I left that conversation thinking like, yeah, man, I don't think that he's crazy for being as confident as he is. Um,
So I had that experience with my wife. My wife is an atheist, like a staunch atheist. She's from China, so her atheism's directed toward Buddhism. But she had no like when she was here before I met her, there was like multiple here it's all Catholics. There were multiple Catholics trying to get her to become a Christian, and it wasn't taking. After about 3 or 4 years of marriage, I broke her into theism, so she's like a theist now. She uses terms like the God or have you prayed to the God today? But she's not Christian in any kind of way, and she's definitely not like if I was trying to push her toward Buddhism, she would just reject everything that I'm saying. So at least there's like there's movement there, but it's a hard road. It's going to be a long time before I get her over that hump.
Yeah. Um, what I'll add though is that I think I think I am getting further and further away from Christianity over time.
Mhm.
Um, but Christianity doesn't exhaust all of theism. You know what I mean? So
So that's a good transitioning point from my point of view toward your point of view. What exactly is pushing you, or you know what I mean, in the conversation? What is pushing you away from Christianity overall?
I guess a bunch of things. There's probably going to be like two main categories of things, I guess. The first category I'll call like historical reasons, and the second category I'll call
Mhm.
like philosophical reasons. Um, I think that I guess I'll start with philosophical reasons. Um, Prior to the past 2 years, I'll say like my YouTube career, I don't think I
Mhm.
gave a lot of weight to like the problem of animal suffering. I don't think I gave a lot of weight to like the problem of like divine hiddenness and stuff like that. Um,
Mhm.
but I think that I've just started to like realize that I care a lot more about the suffering of non-human animals. Um,
Okay.
and I guess I just never really thought about how much suffering there would have been in the millions and millions and millions of years, prior to humans coming around. So I think that that's
Mhm.
something that just squares really weird with the Christian God. Not with all
I
God
if I could throw in
concepts.
just a little small question,
Yeah.
because I didn't go through this. I'm from a very different type of Catholicism than you. Did you have to go through the transition point of thinking everything was created to evolution's true? Was that a
Oh yeah,
process
yeah, yeah.
for
No,
you, or
I grew up a young Earth creationist.
okay?
We were.
So yeah, we were on completely different pages there. So
Mhm.
like that must have been like, I don't know, shocking, mind blowing. Like what happened?
Yeah, so I mean, I went to school in the basement of the FSSP church that my grandparents founded
Mhm.
for first through eighth grade, and we used Protestant homeschool textbooks. And the Protestant homeschool textbooks said stuff like all these crazy Darwinists think that we evolved from monkeys, but we Christians we know that God created us directly. All that kind of stuff. Then I got to a public high school and I was that kid who was like raising my hand, being like, teacher, that's, God actually created us and evolution's not real. And my poor freshman year biology teacher was probably like so fed up with me. um,
Uh,
but
Do you think that that experience, because that's kind of where I'm coming from with my anti-apologetics, of being lied to undermines your overall faith. Like it isn't just about whether or not logically God exists. There's also a question of, well, are any of the things that I was told by the people who taught me the faith, are they even correct? You think that's a factor?
well,
Because I think
yeah, it
that's a
has
factor
to
for a
be. I
lot of
mean,
people.
there's no way that it couldn't be a factor. You know what I mean? I'm I'm a human being, and as much as I would like love to be like a logic machine or something, um, I I'm not. I'm a human being. Um, so yeah, of course, the fact that I was raised. In fact, I think that the young Earth creationism and the Abeka Brand textbooks, you know, I think
Mm.
that they were probably the origin point of my ultimate, like, you know, deconversion, or at least my stopping of practicing of Catholicism. Um,
Eh,
because, like
This
you
is
said,
something that I've said to Trent Horn directly in our chats together. We have yet to actually talk face to face, but we've talked on Twitter, we've talked on his comments, we've talked in a few places, and I keep yelling this at him, especially as he was going more and more to the Brian Holdsworth side of Catholic YouTube. I'm glad he pulled back from that, but I'm very disappointed that Trent, who for a long time was very careful, I just reviewed his book, Why We're Catholic. That's almost a perfect apologetical book. I don't know why for the last 3 years, and even still today, he's still throwing a little bit of red meat out there. It's such a bad tactic because the moment someone who has faith finds out that the foundation of their faith is a lie, there's no way to keep them Catholic or keep them Christian. There just isn't. You can't lie to someone to get them to the truth. I just feel that's a terrible approach. I don't care how sales tactic you're being, it's a bad approach.
yeah, and I mean to be fair to the trads, they don't think that they're lying. I mean, like these,
Oh,
my parents and the teachers at my little public school, or my little FSSP school and all that, they, you know, they were convinced that those darn Darwinists were all just, they just hate the Catholic Church because they're all actually Freemasons. And, like they were
Mhm.
convinced about this stuff. So I don't think that they're lying. I just think that they're
I'm
wrong.
sure Biden becoming a Freemason doesn't help anything now.
Oh, no. And yeah, of course not. Yeah. I don't think he became a Freemason, right? Didn't he just like get an award from a Freemason or something? Like he was like awarded an honorary something or other. I don't
I
actually know. I'm
think
not into
I
politics, but
I think the email that everyone's shocked about was saying that he was inducted in, but I don't know how accurate that was. Michael Lofton read it, so I don't know.
okay. Yeah, I don't know either. But I had. Oh, so I guess let me go back to the question. I don't think I fully answered your question yet.
Okay, sorry.
So there's the philosophical piece, and yes, young Earth creationism. Like, oh, if the church can be wrong about the age of the Earth and evolution, what else can the church be wrong about? Right. That was kind of like the thought
Mm-hmm.
process. So that's the one side. But then I think the other side, I refer to it as a historical. And like I just think the more that I learn about like the history of the Bible, textual criticism and stuff like that, I also think that I get further and further away from Christianity in general. And I'll say things like that because I grew up being convinced that, like, not only that Matthew wrote Matthew and Mark wrote Mark, but also that like Moses wrote the Torah. You know what I mean? So when I found out that like not only did Moses not write the Torah, which like that was I could kind of get. I was like, all right, fine, whatever. But, like Matthew didn't write Matthew, Mark didn't. Oh my gosh, half of the the pastoral epistles aren't written by Paul. Like, oh my, Peter didn't write First and Second Peter. Like, so I think that all forces me further away from Christianity as well. You know what I mean?
So the first time I really had a problem with apologetics. This is before I became anti-apologetic in my views and in my videos. Um, is when me and Jimmy Aiken had a disagreement, and one of my viewers called into Catholic Answers, and they told my viewer not to watch my channel because I'm promoting an anti-Catholic book, a book called the Catholic Study Bible, by the way, that has all the bishop and Neil Oath and all that Neil
Jimmy Aiken
stats and
said
all that.
that.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was like, "Don't." Actually, I got my copyright strike because I repeated what I said, and Douglas Beaumont got super offended, and he tried to sue me.
Huh. Um.
They really really love the uh, the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, which I have the New Testament version. I'm actually waiting for my Old Testament one to come in. But I love the Oxford Catholic Study Bible, and I happen to love the Oxford Ecumenical Study Bible. But they absolutely hate it, and most of Catholic Answers apologists do not like the NABRE. They hate it, and when I defend it, they get upset. And like I said, they told at least one listener, don't. They didn't say my channel specifically. He just said I listened to it, and then he repeated what I said word for word, and then the Jimmy's like, oh no, no, that's not a good Bible. That's a very liberal Bible. It was very funny to
Huh.
see.
And they don't like it because it'll have like footnotes in it that'll say like, hey, the long ending of Mark wasn't there in the original manuscript, and that the pericope about the woman caught in adultery is not original to the Gospel of John and stuff like that. Like, is that why?
Well, no, it's more because there's three reasons that I've heard over the years. One is that it has liberal language, and it lends toward I guess feminine, whatever, feminist talking points. Basically, because it uses a gender neutral language slightly. It's not even that strong compared to the the current stuff that's out there. And then the other one is that it the notes itself uh, are non-Catholic notes. They're scholarly notes that are not that don't promote Catholic, uh, not even Catholic theology, but like Catholic talking points. So, for instance, I was going to bring up before we transition to you questioning me, I was going to bring up the Isaiah scroll. I've known the Isaiah scroll is three documents combined together for over 20 some years because I read the Catholic Study Bible from Oxford. I've already known that. I've known that since I first read the Bible, like even before I finished reading it the first time. So that's not a shocking revelation to me. Like Kip's throwing it out there, like, "Oh, this is gonna like be amazing." It's not amazing. You already know the facts. But you have people like Jimmy Akin and Trent Horn who are not as bad. I think they're of Catholic apologists, they are the two top tier. But you have people like Tyler Marshall who are promoting this anti-intellectual version of Catholicism, which how you can be Catholic without a pope, I still don't get. But whatever. They're supposedly not schismatic, even though I'll be honest with you, I think eventually they're going to get an official warning from a bishop at some point. You just can't keep saying the Pope isn't the Pope without, getting the ban hammer on the Catholic side.
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that you are right about that. But yeah, yeah. I bet you that we can agree with this. It's probably not hard to imagine that somebody whose Catholicism was wrapped up in, Isaiah containing legitimate prophecies that came true 200 years later,
Mhm.
rather than being three different texts smushed together, written hundreds of years apart,
Mhm.
right? Oh, shoot, okay. This is a lot more natural than it seemed. It seems very supernatural because this book was making prophecies 200 years beforehand. And then you
Mhm.
learn that it was just actually written over the course of 200 years, and it's actually telling you,
Yeah.
maybe that's not legitimate prophecy anymore. You can see how that's like less impressive, I guess, or less
So
supernatural at least.
if someone finds the clip, because I'm sure someone will look for it, it's we're talking about the soul. Me on my show, I had just read the Liturgy of the Hours. It was one of the Gregories. I don't remember which one, and he was talking about the soul as anima, as energy. And I mentioned that in my video. So like I read it in the morning. I got home. I was really excited about it. I mentioned that, and then the guy goes onto the thing onto Catholic Answers, and they say, "Well, what kind of Catholic were you listening to?" And then they mention the Catholic Study Bible, and bam, and then a few, I guess maybe the next night, Jimmy Akin again gets a question about the Catholic Study Bible, and he talks about how terrible it is and how you shouldn't watch Catholics that are promoting stuff from there because it's liberal. Funny enough, like 2 or 3 years later, Jimmy Akin took some of that stuff back on his own, not like related to this. He was just like, "Hey, yeah," but like he has asked the question, like, "Do my views change over time or something like that?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's sometimes that I regret saying certain things that are kind of more." I think he used staunch Catholic. I don't ever think he uses like radical traditionalist. He's very good at choosing his words, unlike me. So, but yeah, he did eventually apologize for some of the stuff that he was saying, but it doesn't matter. That caller's never going to think I'm legitimate again. He's never going to think I'm a real Catholic. It's a weird dividing line because you're apologetics and you're pro Protestant apologetics because you're trying to get Protestants to convert in. So you can't say something. Me and Tux talk about this a lot. You can't say things that would push away Protestants. You're trying to get them to join. So you're completely the truth you're presenting is sells. You're not trying to get the Protestant to become Catholic. You're trying to tell the Protestant, hey, no. Like Catholics and Protestants have a lot more in common than you think. And it's like, no, we don't. Don't give them that lie. We're literally two different traditions.
Yeah,
What we have in common is our origin. That's it.
it does kind of make me sad that so much of Catholic apologetics seems way more interested in making Protestants Catholic rather than making atheists Catholic,
Hmm.
um, because I think that, and this is going to sound really mean, but like I just think that Protestants are like easier targets in the
Hmm.
sense that maybe that's not mean, maybe that's just like they agree more already, but I feel like Catholics are fighting an uphill battle trying to get atheists on board, but a downhill battle. Like, they've got the high ground. It's easier for them, I think, to get Protestants in the sense that the Protestants think that Mark wrote Mark and all that. Great. Okay, perfect. We're already in. I'm not going to bother trying to
Mm.
convince you that Mark didn't really write Mark, even though all the Catholic scholars are admitting that Mark didn't write Mark. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. It just feels like it's kind of like two different. I don't know. It just feels like, yeah, all the apologetic focus seems to be on Protestants, and it's working,
All right.
right? I mean, it seems like there's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of.
no, it is. Yeah, I mean, Ruslan, and I think even James Wright of all people have given a little bit of like, well, maybe Catholics aren't that bad, but they're still completely wrong. Like the they're convincing the new generation of Protestants that are coming up that Catholics and Protestants agree with each other, and we don't. Like it's a bizarre argument to make.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, so we only have an hour, and we're already 30 minutes in. I pretty much got all my major questions in. Feel free to push back and ask me some things. So
Yeah.
I'm here.
So I guess I'll just ask you some questions. So you and I agree too much. you know, um, uh, like I guess when I found out that Mark didn't write Mark and stuff like that,
Hmm.
um, it was a big deal to me. It. I'll even say that it was a big enough deal that it was like, wow, my credence in the claims of the Gospels has fallen dramatically, I would say. Um, and evidently, that's not the case for you. Maybe because it never, your credence in the claims of the Gospels was never as high as mine to begin with, maybe because you were never under the impression that Mark wrote Mark or whatever. That could be the case.
I wouldn't say I was never under that impression. So
Okay.
like when I was like pre-15, yeah, Mark wrote Mark. But I had an interesting journey back into Catholicism. So I left when I was 15, and then I came back at 33. In that time, I read through a lot of ancient text, and I was a martial artist, so I self-identified as a Taoist, philosophically, not religiously, but that's how I identified for about 15 years. And the key thing here is that Lao Tzu may not have existed. Okay, so the founder of the philosophical faith that I was practicing didn't exist, and yet I and all Taoists are very comfortable following the Tao. So having read through in order, going from the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis all the way through the Roman and Greek myths, and then the Roman and Greek histories, all the way up to the time of the Bible before I read the Bible again. So I tried reading it at 15, couldn't do it, tried at 21, couldn't do it. Having read through all this history, then coming to the Bible at like 27, it was much more easier to read because I understood the tropes, I understood the connections. I've already seen this game played with other religions, I've seen this game played with other histories. So I recognized the Gospels for what they were, which is Greek lives. I never thought of them as like a Jewish text. No, this is clearly Greek literature. Like I've read this before. I just got done reading Plutarch, a year ago. Now I'm reading the Gospels. I know exactly what this is. Okay, so I read Revelation. I know what an apocalypse reads like. I've read them before. I'm no longer thinking this is literal. This is clearly metaphorical language because it says it at the beginning of the book. Oh, and these are separate books. I've read separate books all about the same stuff and they have different takes. So I don't think the ending of Revelation is telling me the entire Bible can't be changed. No, it's saying this really hard, difficultly coded text shouldn't be changed because then you'll lose the metaphors and you won't understand what it's actually talking about. So to me, it didn't bother me because when I came to the text and I had completed the Bible for the first time, I had already read the literature that inspired it. On the other hand, when I tried to read it at 15, I couldn't get past, I think, Numbers or Deuteronomy. Once I got to, once you hit the giants and the talking donkey, you're kind of like, what am I reading? And as a teenager, there was no getting like there was no getting past that. I was just like, okay, no, this is I can't read this. Forget about it. But having read the Quran now and having read, the Atahasis and having read the Bhagavad Gita and all this, the Rig Vedas and all this stuff, it makes it a lot easier to understand what the Bible's doing because I have references now.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think, especially, I think if you've read something like, did you mention Parallel Lives, or you mentioned
Yes.
Plutarch? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you've read if you've read Plutarch's entry on Alexander the Great,
Hmm.
and then you read the Gospels, and you're like, oh wait, like this, I get it.
Yeah. Oh, his god, his Zeus came down in the form of a snake, but we don't really know if that happened. Yeah. So like, I get to the Bible. Julius Caesar's
The
the
lives of the
great
Caesars,
grandson of
right? Yeah.
Venus. Like, yeah, like okay, like so I know what's happening here. So I get to the Bible. I'm not like shocked at the claim. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what they would write about their Messiah.
Yeah.
Let's see if it's true. So like, there was no shock at the revelation that hey, they're using inspiration to write this. Like they're using other sources to piece together what they're doing, because what they're not doing is they're not using Greek sources. They're using the Old Testament, what we call the
Yes.
Old Testament. They're using the Septuagint. And when you see the multiple connections that they're doing, there are parts of the Bible that really is just stealing lines from the Old Testament.
Matthew does it all the
Once you,
time.
yeah, once you see that, it makes sense. Like,
Mhm.
okay, so these are Greek writers using a Greek method on a Jewish book.
Yep.
Okay, why would that bother me at all? But when I was 15 and I'm trying to understand it in a Jewish context, and I see giants and talking snakes and uh, global floods and people living to 900 years old, I'm like, oh, it's fiction. And then I read it as an adult, and I'm like, oh no, this is true. I get it. I've been that guy. I've been that guy. My best friend's been that person. My best female friend, she's been that person. All these stories now make sense because I've lived enough life that I know what's happening.
Yeah. So again, agreeing too much. I look at that here. Let's see if we can't generate a little bit of disagreement.
Hmm. Hmm.
I look at all that stuff and I go, okay, I'm comfortable in saying I think that the gospel narratives probably contain roughly the same amount of fact and roughly the same amount of fiction as the entry on Alexander the Great in Parallel Lives. They both contain a lot of fact, and there's a little fiction thrown in there. I don't think that Alexander the Great really has Zeus and a nymph as his great 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 grandparents if you go back far enough or whatever, despite the fact that it says so in a Greek history, in a Greek Vita. And but I think that a lot of the stuff that he writes about Alexander the Great probably is true, right? I think that he's probably from Macedonia. Great. I think that Jesus was probably from Nazareth. That seems plausible to me, right? Like, cool. Was his mom a virgin? I doubt it. And so what I'm doing here is I'm saying that, like, I think that once you understand the genre, it becomes a lot easier to think that the stuff that's hard to believe, you don't have to believe it because, it belongs to the same genre as, Alexander the Great being descended from gods and nymphs.
So I have a list that I cannot find. Where is it? Is it over here? No, you're not over here. There it is. I think this is it. Yeah. Okay. So this is how I learned to read the Bible when the Bible was no longer. Once I could understand the Bible, this is how I learned how to read it. And I went to the Church Fathers. This is from the Church Fathers. This isn't me making things up. I wish I was that smart, but I'm not. And so I learned these first, which are these top ones up here. This is basically Origins, and then I learned these later, and these are these are different popes and of course Augustine versions of how to understand it. And once I learned this, well, there's nothing in the Bible that I can't answer because it's going to be one of those.
Yes, but as a Catholic, you are committed to the literal truth of Mary being a perpetual virgin.
Mm-hmm. And as a Catholic, I believe it. But I don't have a problem with that because I have read all this other stuff. So I believe miracles are true. I believe demons are. I don't think demons are demons. I think there's other explanations. But are there real demons? Sure. Are there things in the supernatural world? Sure. Do we as humans have a way to understand that? No. Do I think the best take is the Bible? Yeah, because I've read all the other takes and I know which ones I lend more credibility to and which ones I lend less credibility to. So based on that, yeah, the Bible makes sense to me. But I'm comparing it to a lot of other religions. Most Catholics can't do it. Most people can't do that.
So, when you read something like in the Lives of the Caesars that Caesar
Mhm.
Augustus saw the future in signs and portends and stuff like that. Um,
I don't think it's impossible. Put it
okay,
that way.
so that is going to be like a legitimate area of disagreement between us. And for
Mhm.
me, I think it's as simple as just like, I'm like really hard headed, right? Like I went to engineering school. I did the whole science thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, so I just kind of view all
Have
that
you ever
stuff.
had a vision? Let me ask you, because
Never.
you've never had a vision
So
ever.
I would have told you that I've had plenty of religious experiences back when I
Mhm.
was Catholic, but those religious experience they were like feelings of peace and maybe even feelings of elation generally after receiving communion while mass is still happening, just sitting in the pew kind of eyes closed meditating. That was about, and maybe even I felt like I was levitating, but I would have told
Mhm.
you that it was like a spiritual levitation. Like it wasn't like a physical, like nobody would have looked at me and been like, wow, Kevin's floating. Um, and I think
So
that's about as
one
far. Yeah.
so one of the goals in actual Hindu yogiism, not talking about American exercise breathing and stretching, is to have a vision. So one of my practices as a Taoist, as a martial artist, was to sit in a meditative pose right before I would teach my students. And the goal is to have a vision or an outer body experience. It's actually what you're trying to do in if you're doing the real yoga. I'm not talking about the exercise stuff. You're trying to have a vision. And you will get there if you breathe enough and you learn how to focus and how I believe they call it. Oh, I think it's lucid dreaming is what they call it. It's been a long time. Obviously, since I've been an active Catholic, I don't do that anymore. I just do the exercise version of it. But when you're doing it as a meditative practice, your goal is to have a vision. And if you're not having visions by like week 2, you're not doing it right. Like it's literally a meditative state where you're projecting your future and it's almost power of positive thinking where you're using your intellect, your logic to project what's most likely to happen. And this is very Jordan Peterson. You want to do two things because people can't get somewhere unless they have something that they're running from and something that they're running to. So you want to think about the worst possible outcomes, and that's going to be your negative trip. And you want to think about the best positive outcomes. That's going to be your positive trip. And then what you're doing is you're setting up in your mind different scenarios of how to live out your life. Well, this has been an ancient practice. This is like this is here. Like I learned this from this stuff here. This is ancient practice. So this is not something that's out of the realm of naturalism. I want to be very clear. Your brain is doing it. Like this is your stuff. But that lends credence to what happens here in the gospel. So they don't have words for psychology or sociology in ancient times. What they have is an understanding of the world based on spiritualism, based on the culture around them. Well, that culture includes prophecy, includes faith, includes miracles, and they have to understand things within the context that they live in. So when I read uh, Isaiah or I read Daniel having a vision, well, I know how to get there on my own through meditation. So that's not out of the realm of reality to me. People making predictions, that's not out of the realm of reality. I have video games that can predict who's going to win the Super Bowl. So if a video game can make a prophecy, you better, and have it be correct, you better darn well believe a person with logic and reason can make a prophecy based on what they've seen in their lives.
I mean, so yeah, I don't disagree with virtually anything that you said there. It just seems to me
Mhm.
like there's this big old gap that you and I both, we agree, we get to this gap, and then you seem totally happy just to kind of step over the gap. And I seem to be sitting here going like, what are you doing? That's dangerous. Don't don't go. And I view that gap as, so yeah, I'm cool with the idea that people have lucid dreams. I'm also even cool with the idea that like maybe Mark was written in the year 70 and then the temple was destroyed in 71 or whatever. I forget, the dates are going to be somewhat off.
Yeah.
But like the Romans were on their way, right? So like putting this prophecy of the destruction of the temple onto Jesus's lips is probably not insane. That might be like us predicting today the complete displacement of all Muslims in Palestine or something. It's
Well,
like, hasn't happened yet, but we're on our way.
I use 9/11 actually as the best example. So you and how old are you? Are you like in
29.
your 30s or 40s? 20. Okay, so
29, yeah.
you're not old enough. So let's pretend you're 40 for this conversation. Um, we grew up at a time when the New World Order and Y2K was on everyone's lips. The top TV shows was X-Files, Millennium, Harsh Days, and First Wave. And you know what all these shows had in common? In the year 1999, a great catastrophe is going to happen. And the two towers are going to get hit. This was on everyone's mind. This was on everyone's lips. In fact, it was such a big deal that when 2000 hit and nothing happened, people were legitimately disappointed, only for a year later for it to actually take place and everyone be shocked. So, do I think it's possible for people to think and project and predict accurately a world cataclysm based on their society? Yes. Mark Miller was writing Batman and wrote the scene right before it actually happened. I myself was writing a book that was about an oncoming apocalypse, and I also said it beginning in New York with a tragedy. It's not because we're psychic. We can read the room and we can read the tensions. So it makes perfect sense that Jesus, living in a Roman controlled area, knowing the history of the church from the Old Testament, would say, yeah, they're going to destroy the temple. It's going to happen. You don't have to be, you don't have to be like a year before. You can be 30 years, 40 years, 100 years before. That's already in the air. The Romans have already trampled on temple ground. They've already entered Jerusalem. They've already conquered the city. Of course, that's on your mind.
Right. And I guess my whole point though is like I'm cool with like all that stuff. And then I hear about Mary being a virgin forever and I'm like, she gave birth. I don't think she was a virgin. But you kind of just seem to be like, yeah, no, I'm just going to, kind of take the hit on this one and be like, yeah, no, I believe it anyway.
Well, I don't believe it anyway. I understand typology. Like we are, as Catholics or as Christians in general, Protestants can never get over this hump. So this is why I don't understand Catholic apologetics at all. We're typologically saying Mary is the ark. Mary is the covenant. Mary is we're making this argument. So if you don't understand how typology works, I don't even understand as a Protestant how you can comprehend what virginity means. Like she's perfectly pure because she has to be, because typologically she's representing the most purest thing that's ever existed. She's holding in her belly God, the word of God, which is what's in the Ark of the Covenant, which is what's in the ark that's being, saving life and humanity.
But Catholics aren't committed to the fact that Mary was a perpetual virgin in the same way that Catholics are committed to the idea that Mary is the ark. Catholics don't literally think that Mary was an ark, right? They think that she was a human being. But she was typologically an ark.
So
but Catholics aren't free to think that Mary was only typologically a perpetual virgin. Catholics are committed to the literal, like Mary was literally. So you see the difference between those?
I disagree with your differencing. I'm going to try to fight with you about whether or not she was the ark or not, whether or not she was Eve or not. I would say
but
that
she wasn't literally, certainly, right? She wasn't an ark because ark means not human, right?
So I think your understanding of the word literal is wrong. Literal just means literarily. Okay. So yes, in the literal sense of the typological form of the literature that we're reading, she actually does represent what typologically she is what's the word? It's when they say it before it happens. Not progenerative. Anyway, the prototype that she's from. That's not the right word, but I'm just using that one. That's there so that way it can sort of like pre-represent what it is. That's why Melchizedek is Christ. There is no identity for Melchizedek, but Jesus Christ is the order of Melchizedek. That's how Protestants get their typological argument, which they don't even understand as a typological argument, for Jesus making appearances before he's incarnated. That's where they get that idea. The fact that they don't understand that doesn't make it not true. It just means they don't understand their own argument.
So, going back to the word literal, the word literal doesn't mean like literary. Even if that might be the etymology of the word, but
no. Hold on. Wait. So I'm going to use. Do you watch the Augustine Institute?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, or do you watch the guys that they used to be on Matt Fradd's channel, but now they're doing their own thing? They kind of had like a splitting of ways. The
Father
Thomistic
Gregory
Institute.
Pine and stuff, or
yeah, there we go.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so when you listen to them and they talk about what literal means, literal doesn't mean actual. It means that this is what the words on the page are actually saying. So Catholics have made the argument for a long time, longer than I've been around, that we are literally following the Bible, but we're not taking it as literal, like as in, we're using ultra literalism now is the word they use, but we're not taking it as meaning, oh, this is what actually happened in this way. This is what happened truthfully, but it's T, capital T truth, not F fact. You get what I'm saying? And even facts facts are things that doesn't mean that something's true. Fact just means that this is a data point. And that's the way they're using the word literal. And the argument that they make on their channel is that Protestants are misunderstanding the word literal. Like they're not just misunderstanding typology. They're misunderstanding the way that we use the language in Catholicism. I'm not talking about the way that the Webster Dictionary defines it. The way that Catholicism has used these words are being misunderstood by Protestants.
Okay.
And I agree with them on that completely.
I'm going to not use the word literal then, since I think that that's causing me confusion. And instead I'm going to use the word actual. And I just want to make sure that we like understand. So when I say actual, I mean like corresponds to reality. Like that's kind of like what I mean. So do you think that Mary was
actually a virgin? Yes.
See, okay, so that's what I'm getting at. And I think that Catholics are committed to Mary actually being a virgin for her whole life, including when she conceived and then gave birth, in a way that they are not committed to Mary actually being Eve or Mary actually being the ark. Mary's not actually Eve, even if she's metaphorically Eve or something like that. Mary's not actually an ark, even if she's metaphorically an ark or something like that. But Mary's not metaphorically a virgin. She's actually a virgin. And I think that's the...
So, I would say that the problem with trying to parse out those things is that you'll quickly fall into heresy. So, and this is a Catholic problem. It's not a...
Yeah. I'm comfortable being...
So if you start talking about Mary as not being the mother of God, you've just hit a heresy. And Protestants fall into that all the time. So as a Catholic who understands what the writers, what the artists are doing, I'm going to hold to their intent. I think their intent is correct. And I think the miracle of virginity is possible. And that's the key thing about apologetics, is that there only has to be one little possibility that it's true for it to be true for the apologetic. The problem is when you start doing that to everything, well, now you stand for nothing. Now you're just a liar. And I think that's the dividing line between an honest believer and a lying apologist, if that makes any sense.
It does, but actually, before I say it does, let me see if I can repeat it back to you and tell you if I got what you were saying instead of just saying.
And we only got 4 minutes because I got to go to work. So
okay. So what you're saying, I guess, is something like the apologist is going to kind of make excuses for something, whereas the honest thinker is just going to say like, yeah, I believe because I have to. It is what it is. Deal with it. Is that kind of it?
I wouldn't word it that way, but that's basically it. It's
Okay.
like this is what the claim is. I'm someone who believes. I'm going to take the belief at face value, which is what the literalism is supposed to be.
Actual. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's supposed to be it. And the fact that Protestants don't get that means that there's a lot of bad Christianese out there that has nothing to do with the faith. And you end up tying people to beliefs that are not dogma. And this happens with Dan all the time. Dan calls doctrine dogma, and it frustrates the crap out of me because I'm like, hey, like that's not dogma. That's that you I get you trying to say dogmatism, but that's not dogma. That's not something that you have to believe to be a Catholic or a Christian. That's something that a denomination is a belief that's being foisted upon because they think it defends all this other stuff. So you don't have to question the virgin birth or you don't have to
Yeah.
question God's Christ's divinity. And none of that stuff is necessary. That's all argumentation. It's like building hedges in front of a glass window. Like it's not actually part of the structure you're defending.
I'm gonna want to talk again. Hopefully, sometime not in the. Hopefully, we don't wait another year before we talk again. Because I would love to kind of talk to you about, like you and I agree on so much of look, it's trope fulfillment. It's authors looking at Old Testament and then kind of fulfilling prophecy and like because like, oh, like hey, there's a prophecy, I can fulfill it. I can fulfill it with this literary technique and all that.
Yeah.
And I look at all that and I'm like, okay, look, it's literary. I don't have to get tied up in knots about Mary being a virgin. But then you
It's the
see that
guidance of the Holy Spirit.
what's guidance of the Holy Spirit, like the way
What
that
we're talking about is like, yeah, what they picked, and they're picking the right metaphor and then picking the right. That's the claim. The actual claim is the Holy Spirit guiding them what to pull from.
and that for you is a claim that like that's kind of like Mary being a perpetual virgin. You're willing just to kind of be like, yeah, I know it kind of sounds wild, but like I'm in it, man. Like I'm committed.
I mean, and I have to end it here, but kind of like Wes Huff, I lost my ability to walk. Of course, I wasn't a child; I was a grown man, and I prayed to God, and I got my ability to walk back when the doctor said it was impossible. And even as I was doing it, the doctors were like, "We don't understand what's happening." And that's with medical doctors, not like I'm not talking about being in Palestine or a different country. That's here in the United States at the Jocelyn Center, at my local clinic, going through the process and countering muscle atrophy as a diabetic. So yeah, I believe miracles are real. I do believe the impossible is possible in under certain circumstances. So yeah,
Cool.
I'm not coming from it from the classical theological. Oh, we're going to define God as all these attributes that have nothing to do with the Bible. No, I think what the Bible's describing as God is correct because the Bible doesn't describe God. It describes man's relationship to the divine. That's why not all the stories make sense because some of the stories are them projecting back what they think their best reality was, what they hope their future reality is going to be, but it's actually taking place in the past because that's how they wrote. But that relationship is true. The natures of human beings and the way that human beings act in this book is very true, is very real. So um yeah, so one day we can have the conversation about miracles, but I'm out of time.
Cool. Do you want to add anything else before we head out of here?
Yes, I'd like to add two things. Number one, please, everybody out there, watch my channel, Alpha Centurion. Oh, nice cat. Hello, cat. I do anti-apologetics, but I'm Catholic and I'm pro-Christianity, so you can hear some nice, interesting takes on things. Number two, I am a very small channel. I'm very pleased and happy and grateful that Kevin